see those today in some of those, some of the imaging from NASA.
Yeah. And you can listen to, I forget what this interview is, we'll try and find it. Monroe Bobby, he was talking about, like we were talking about before, the classic beings that most people would encounter were these reptilian beings, like I said, these alligator beings. So he ended up writing this book. He wrote a few books, actually, but one of them was called Far Journeys. I want to check it out, actually, because I'm fully on board on this. I'm so intrigued. But this one, he kind of talks about how they use their consciousness to travel back in time and on the Earth and different timelines on the Earth, and just to see like way back in time, just to see where it all kind of began. And what they were seeing was these reptilian beings had seeded humanity. They at least had a part in it, in creating humanity. And basically all it was for was like this slave. We are this slave-like race, and they were using humanity to feed off our energy because we have this potent energy that seems to be a hot commodity among these beings. It's like this energy vampire kind of situation going on, which is pretty common, actually, when we think about these reptilian stories. They feed off our energies, or even like demons or attachments and stuff like that.
Yeah, it might be the origin of the vampire myth.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, I thought one of the really interesting things was... Oh, so the reptilian beings, they were known as the Collective, I guess they called them. I feel like I've heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know what I worry about sometimes? You're like, is this the original story that everyone based it off of? Or is this person just remote viewing and then in their brain tying together things they've heard on the internet?
Yeah, that's what you can never tell. Like it seems like a pretty subjective thing. Like, how much is your own consciousness affecting what you're seeing in this realm?
But then, like, the whole reptilian obsession, you can even see it in Sumerian cuneiforms, or not cuneiforms.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even on the carvings on the wall, there's reptilians. So, I mean, like, this has been around for thousands of years, this, obsession with reptilians.
This worship of, the symbol of the snake is a huge thing.
But that has to do more with Kundalini. I don't know if that's really... But then again, if we're like really tying everything together, if the whole method of the Monroe Institute was to practice Kundalini to get people to another state, and they went and met the reptilians.
Interesting.
It's all
making
tying
connections. Some of these stories, I just pulled out a couple of stories here and there. So he went into these lower fourth dimensional realms, right? Where he was he would just kind of move around and see what he could see and report back what was happening. But he encountered these in this really low level space. He encountered these demon-like entities. He didn't really describe me, just called them these demon-like entities. And they were starting to attack his astral body, and that's when they had to kind of learn how to protect themselves in that realm. That's what I need to do. Actually, before I start fucking around with this stuff, I need to learn how to protect myself in these realms.
Maybe call up Kadrick. Kadrick might have some tips for you.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to make a note of that. Learn how to protect my body. Okay, so...
Well, that's for astral travel, though.
Yeah. No more attachments, Matt.
That's what I want to do. Oh, yeah, I don't want any more attachments. So then we get to Courtney Brown, right?
Good old
Remote
Courtney
viewer.
Brown.
In the same program, but it was trained by Ed Dames. It's probably a name we all know.
Remote viewer.
We've seen his stuff before. So Courtney Brown was induced into this method, and he was asked, and this is more kind of the remote viewing side of things, I think, is where this gets into. But he was asked to sort of find the source of where these greys were coming from. Because for some reason, they'd worked out that maybe through this program, but they worked out that the greys were kind of operating on this hive mind, right? So they were all one sort of person, one sort of entity, but they're all connected, all their minds, which is one hive mind connected, with the same, same goals, they're all working together as one. So he was asked to kind of travel and through their consciousness and sort of travel back to the source or the origin of this hive mind, where it came from. It's like, and this was like in the government CIA program, so apparently, where they knew about these creatures and they wanted to know where they were coming from and where this consciousness was coming from that was controlling them. Which I thought was like, that in and of itself is super interesting that they knew that much about what was happening. But anyway, so they traveled through the consciousness and they found this like sprawling web of just like so many different links in this consciousness. And it really was like a web that they sort of traveled through to try and get to the center of where this is coming from. And what they found was there was a group of 10... main sort of, it was like a ruling governing group, and it was like these, he saw them as these energy bodies of these beings, right? There wasn't like a physical being, it was like an energy body. So there was 10 of those, and they were kind of governing the rest of the consciousness, but everything was connected. And there was this one overseer who kind of saw over everything else, like a supreme leader, I guess they called it. And he was kind of the head thing running the show. And I guess as soon as he saw this thing, I don't know if it's sore back or whatever, but he was like ripped out of his back to his body again.
Was it a reptilian? Was it a reptilian?
They didn't. No, they didn't describe it as a reptilian. This one specifically, it was just like this energy form that was kind of controlling these greys, and he was basically describing the fact that these energy entities were using the corporeal form of these grey bodies. It was like a robot that they were inserting their consciousness into, and like a beehive, basically, these little worker bees getting around doing their bidding, all working for the same thing.
Trying to steal energy from people. Is that the goal?
That's the Reptilians' goal. I don't know if they ever get into what the goal of the Greys specifically were, but you always hear stories of like the Greys and the Reptilians kind of working together, or they're like, the Reptilians are these enforcer types, like they're guards or something like that, while the Greys are doing like all the shit kicking work, all the menial tasks.
Yeah. The Greys are confusing, man. Some are supposed to be biological entities that were created to be slaves to serve a greater purpose. Some are like their own species, as tall ones, as short ones, as Ebens. They get confused for the Greys a lot. I'm still like unclear on Greys, and I've been studying it my whole damn life.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's that whole, like we talked about a couple of weeks back with the David Jacobs thing, where he was sort of describing him as a evolutionary, or not evolutionary, well, kind of step between, how they were trying to make a hybrid between the mantis people and the humans. It's like this step in between.
I guess it's a little insecty, a little human. You guys ever seen that shit where if you took a human and you evolved them, I ever seen that graph where, how you see the graphs where it takes a monkey to a human? You ever seen the one that goes from a human to a gray? Like you can extrapolate out on our own evolution, and our eyes will get bigger, our brain will get bigger, but our bodies will get less, because with all this tech, we don't need to be physically active or strong anymore. So there's always that theory that like we are the Greys and eventually we become them, but that's just like one of like 15 different ideas of what the fuck they are. So
but also like if you spend a lot of time in space, like you don't have a lot of muscle mass, there's no need, you're not sitting in gravity.
But
back to reptilians.
Back to reptilians. So like I said, after I read that CIA document, I kind of dived headfirst into this Monroe Institute stuff and really found a bunch of really interesting little anecdotes and stories about it, and I want to kind of dive into that further, and maybe we'll do that on another show. But as far as reptilians go, they're kind of made mention of here and there. Maybe they go into it further in his books and stuff. But I really wanted to find some fucking gold, some solid gold, alien
gold.
Reptilian nonsense. And so I found myself diving upon the works of Jordan Maxwell.
Dun dun dun!
Yeah, the curmudgeon. The old curmudgeon of the paranormal world. I love his work. He's like this old guy
reptilian
who like,
overlord.
I love how he's like, you kids and your baseball and your... Oh, man, it's so good. I love when he gets into those rants. Anyway, so he has this like awesome story that he's told a couple of times, and I'm gonna reiterate it here because I think it's super fun, and it apparently takes place in Colorado. So I was like, all right, let's do this. So Jordan's doing this radio show, and he's talking specifically about reptilians and their history, and the Sumerians used to worship them, and all the history and stuff you see about the reptilian beings and their manipulation of the humans. Anyway, so he finishes the show and returns home and is like, doing his thing, and he gets this call, and it's like an acquaintance of his that listened to the show and said, I heard you were talking about reptilians, and I need to tell you this story because you were talking about them as this like strange part of history or whatever, but listen to the story. Here's what I got. So this guy is a Las Vegas real estate magnate. He's a hugely successful dude. He's got a shit ton of money. And he has 5 dudes who work underneath him, and this is the top sort of management group of the firm. So this guy explains that every year he takes his top 5 guys and their families, and they do something. They go to Disney World, or they go to like Aruba and stay on a beach somewhere. And this year, the year that he's explaining, they travel to Colorado to do some group camping, some glamping. As you do when you've got a shit ton of money. So anyway, they travel out to, he doesn't say exactly where, but they travel out to somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, like super secluded area. And they got, their camper vans and their tents, and they're having a banging old time. So one morning, they, get up early. There's a group of them, and they decide they want to go for a little hike. So it's a group of most of the guys, the head guy that's calling Jordan, and some wives coming with him and their kids as well. And they do this little hike up this little hill. So they get to the top of the hill, and when they get to the top of the hill, one of them looks down on the other side of the hill and sees like a clearing in this open space. But the clearing is kind of, they've made this circle and cleared, the grass and shrubs and everything, and sort of made this little ritual site. And within the ritual site is a circle of people, and they're all wearing robes, and they're all chanting. And they can hear like this chant that keeps coming through. And
weird.
they sort of, in the middle of nowhere. Like this weird space. Like nothing around them but just forest and mountains and rocks and that's it. So they're looking down at this group, and they're like, oh man, what do we do? Like, do we just kind of back away? And it's kind of curious, so they sort of duck down a little and just kind of see what's going on. And as they're looking down and this group's chanting, all of a sudden this being appears in the center of the group. Bang, just appears.
Woo!
Okay.
And there's one of the people in the robes is in the center of the circle already, and he appears next to this guy, this being. And they said they can't get a good look at it, but it looks kind of weird. And it's like several feet taller than the guy in the middle. And as they're looking, they're like, holy shit, like what is this? And this thing points up to where they're standing on the hill.
Oh no.
Does it look like a reptilian?
Well, they can't see it at this stage.
Okay.
So it points up to where they're looking at the hill, and everyone in the circle turns around and looks up at these families, and they're like, fuck, we're made. We gotta bail out of here. So they sort of turn around and go, okay, let's get the fuck out of here. As they turn around, bang, this being appears right behind them on the track back. And they said it was this huge, hulking, hugely muscled, massive reptilian creature, humanoid, covered in scales, really menacing, a red eyes looking thing. and it doesn't say anything. It's just staring at all. It's like looking at all the kids and looking at the wives, and it's like staring at